authorized in economics, and much of her work has focused on voluntary associations, self-governing arrangements of common pool resources. All of you are probably familiar with the notion of the tragedy of the commons, and her work is on how people self-organize to govern those kinds of institutions. And so you might want to look at some of the books that she's written over time. 29 books written or edited, more than 100 articles dealing with these things. She's Arthur F. Bentley Professor of Political Science at Indiana University and Senior Research Director at the Workshop in Political Theory and Policy Analysis at Indiana University, which has been doing a lot of work on these issues over the years, involving scholars from all over the world. But this is mainly an opportunity for you to interact and to talk with someone you don't get to meet every day. So, open the floor.
Okay, it's my pleasure to be here. I should mention that I did 15 years of research on federal systems in the U.S. And looking at how policing was organized in Indianapolis, Chicago, Black neighborhoods, Chicago, and St. Louis, and then in 80 metropolitan areas. So I've looked at both the public goods side and the common pool resource side, and various forms of polycentric or federal systems. It's your turn to ask questions. And somebody of you has got to organize this and call on one another. You've got a piece of paper and a pen in front of you.
You do.
Yes, so I'll let you be my
Moderate,
moderator.
of course. Who has a question?
I just wanted to sort of start some discussion with, I guess, more of a comment than a question, but as an engineering student, obviously I can't call myself an engineer yet, and I'm still sort of working my way up there, but I like the sort of empirical or experiment-based approach to economics, and I'd sort of like to comment that I think that's a good trend that you and other people in the field have begun moving towards, because a lot of times the theory is really nice and the equations are really nice, and I know this very well now as an engineer, having learned the hard lesson a couple times. Nice equations and nice theory often translate to stuff that doesn't really work, and a lot of times it gets lost in between, why that happens. So I just wanted to say I have a lot of respect for the fact that a lot of your research was done involving case studies and involving field studies and involving lots of data collection, and then looking at empirical, why things work and why things don't, and why everything is not necessarily just sort of the black and white theory that maybe Mr. Hardin or some of the people of his day wanted us to believe that it was. So.
No, and I've just finished doing the last proofing of the published work of a book that will be coming out this spring called Working Together, Collective Action, the Commons, and Multiple Methods in Practice. And it's with Amy Poteet and Marco Jansen. And what we're looking at is field work of individual case studies, meta-analysis, large N, agent-based models, mathematical theory lab, and how not all of them have strengths and weaknesses. There is no perfect field guide or field research way of doing research, but all of them together, you get you see you should learn one method very well, and then learn about some of the others. GPS and remote sensing right now, GIS and remote sensing are new skills on the horizon that are just, well, they're not on the horizon anymore, they've actually been used a lot. And so we worked very hard to try to get that out in terms of working together.
I'm doing my thesis on campus screening ratings, and well, I guess one of the issues that I'm looking at is, well, like sustainability, obviously, deals with like commons and stuff like that. And I can't say I'm familiar with your work, but would you say that that like third-party ratings are like an answer for sustainability, or what do you
I
say?
don't think there's any single strategy that is the answer. So one of my big points is there are no panaceas, there are no models that will do everything. However, I think third-party monitoring is a very important strategy in terms of letting citizens know or campuses know that they're doing an innovative program, or they think they're great, only there are half of the other universities in the country are doing better. And so one of the very challenging things is some of the kinds of policies that one might be interested in looking at are very hard to measure. And so again, you need multiple ways of measuring it. So that would be one way, and that would be very good.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I'm looking at. Like for the past few years, the Green Report Card has been the only, like the Sustainable Endowments Institute Green Report Card has been the only thing that's been rating campuses. But now Princeton Review came out with something, and AASAG is starting to do that. It is starting their own program.
Yeah,
They're doing a
good.
pilot right now.
Good.
So,
And so if a university comes to the top third in all of them, that's probably a pretty good indicator that they are really in the top third. But
yeah.
they're in high in one and low in another, it means that the various ways of measuring are picking up different aspects.
Yeah, it also makes it a lot harder to play to a certain type of rating, or just
Manipulate,
like,
yeah.
just like your efforts to a certain rubric at the expense of things that aren't covered in that rubric.
Exactly.
I have a question. You talk a lot about comparable resources in in really small scales, and especially when it comes to
The Great Lakes.
right. But when I have a question in terms of the United States, especially with the increasing federalization of different topics and issues,
What does federalization?
from state to federal. So
Nationalization.
nationalization,
I
right?
would say federalization. Yeah, I know. I mean, really, I'm serious. To make it more federal means that you're making it more divided in multiple scales.
That's true, but I suppose I consider federal government, national government as the federal. That's I equate national.
Call it
to
national.
We fought a whole civil war over that already, so.
Right. But
Call it national.
the nationalization of issues,
Okay.
such as education, right?
Ridiculous.
What's the viability, especially in terms of education, but just the nationalization of various other topics for common pool resources in the United States?
Well, it depends on the common pool resource. So, and some are pretty large, but there are places, Adela Schlager is doing some excellent work on river compacts. And if you're going to understand how the Colorado or any of the western rivers, Mississippi, are being governed, you do have to study across individual states. And there you need an approach that is bigger than a single state. And with the Mississippi, you've got to understand some of the perverse incentives. One of my graduate students has been doing some research on this. Small towns located on the Mississippi River are always looking for, small towns everywhere, medium-sized, large towns are always looking for better income. And developers were able to go to city councils and say, council, if you will go to Congress, you have a pretty good chance of getting congressional money to add paving the Mississippi River. And one of the ways they pave is they move out at high water, the borders here, low water is here, and they go halfway. And they put in a flood bank with cement. Well, then on the other side of that, you can start putting houses, and you can then start to, and you can get new taxes, and it's great because they're going to be right on. Well, that's what they did before Katrina. And a lot of cities went to Congress, and Congress, so here's one of these problems of money being available that sounds good for flood control. Isn't that always good? Well, if you pave a river and you then have a big storm like that, instead of it being able to spread out generally, it's spread out over New Orleans. So we need to be studying the incentives, and some of this, we'll give you money if you do X, has been very dominant in our national policy and has frequently had secondary consequences that are pretty bad. You want to know if that addressed?
No, I understand. So it depends on the context in
Yes.
which the fungible resources
Yeah.